West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
He did his duty. That's what Liz Cheney said today about Mike Pence at the beginning of the January 6th committee hearing. He stayed true to his oath. That's what Democratic Congressman Pete Aguilar said a few minutes later as he began guiding the hearing, focusing on what Vice President Mike Pence did leading up to and during January 6th, 2021. When a violent mob of Trump supporters attacked Congress, believing they were following Donald Trump's orders. In the end, Mike Pence did the right thing. The question not asked in today's hearing was, why did he wait till the end? Aides to Mike Pence testified today that he never wavered in his belief that the vice president had no authority to reject electoral votes when they were counted by Congress on January 6th.
Did the vice president ever waver in his position that he could not unilaterally decide which electors to accept?
The vice president never budged from the position that I have described as his first instinct, which was that it just made no sense from everything that he knew and had studied about our Constitution that one person would have that kind of authority.
And did the vice president ever waver in his position that he could not delay certification and send it back to the states?
No, he did not.
He never wavered in his position, and he never wavered in his refusal to state his position publicly. Counsel to the vice president, Greg Jacob, testified that he first discussed the procedure for January 6th with Vice President Pence on December 7th.
He told me that he had been first elected to Congress in 2000 and that one of his earliest memories as a congressman was sitting in on the 2001 certification, and he recalled that Al Gore had gavelled down a number of objections that had been raised to Florida.
Mike Pence has known since he saw Al Gore do it that the vice president has only a ministerial function on January 6th and has no power to change the electoral vote count. He knew it for 20 years, and he still said nothing. Nothing. On December 19th, Donald Trump summoned his troops to Washington for a rally on January 6th. That would have been a very good day for Vice President of the United States to announce that nothing can change the Electoral College count on January 6th. Could have made that announcement on the day Donald Trump made the announcement that there would be a rally on January 6th. But Mike Pence decided not to tell Donald Trump and Trump voters the truth, because Mike Pence was still clinging to the dream that someday those Trump voters would be voting for Mike Pence for president. And so he didn't want to be the bearer of bad news to his future voters. And so the man who never wavered privately could not have been more supportive publicly of every Trump lie, every one of them, until 1 p.m. on January 6th. While Donald Trump was delivering his speech, telling his violent, fanatical mob to go to the Capitol and fight like hell, only during that speech did Mike Pence issue a written public statement saying, "It is my considered judgment that my oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not." Mike Pence could have said exactly that a month earlier, but he decided to stay silent. He could have said it a day earlier, but Mike Pence chose silence. Mike Pence stayed silent about what he was going to do on January 6th until the Capitol was already under attack, and that's when he did the right thing. If Mike Pence had said that a month earlier, how many people would have come to Washington on January 6th? Surely some of them would have stayed home. Would Donald Trump even bother to have that rally on January 6th if Mike Pence said clearly and emphatically and repeatedly, beginning on December 7th, what he finally said, timidly, in writing on January 6th? The most important point established by the committee today is that Donald Trump knew it was against the law for Mike Pence to reject any electoral votes. Donald Trump knew that. He knew that he was urging Mike Pence to commit a crime. Everyone knew it. Everyone knew it was illegal, including the lawyer who everyone thought was crazy, but whose advice Donald Trump was following. Attorney John Eastman was the originator of the theory that Mike Pence could reject electoral votes on January 6th. And here's how illegal, how criminal he knew his idea was. After January 6th, John Eastman asked Rudy Giuliani to put his name on the pardon list. It was Attorney John Eastman's considered legal opinion that he needed a pardon for the crime he was urging the president to do, because John Eastman knew he was urging the president to urge Mike Pence to commit a crime. John Eastman also urged Mike Pence's staff to agree that Mike Pence should commit that crime. And in John Eastman's testimony to the January 6th committee, he did nothing but hide behind the Fifth Amendment.
I assert my Fifth Amendment right against being compelled to be a witness against myself.
Did the Trump legal team ask you to prepare a memorandum regarding the vice president's role in the counting of electoral votes at the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021?
Yeah.
Dr. Eastman, did you advise the President of the United States that the vice president could reject electors from 7 states and declare that the president had been reelected?
Yeah.
Dr. Eastman, the first sentence of the memo starts off by saying 7 states have transmitted dual slates of electors to the President of the Senate. Is that statement in this memo true?
Fifth.
Did President Trump authorize you to discuss publicly your January 4th, 2021 conversation with him?
Fifth.
So is it your position that you can discuss in the media direct conversations you had with the President of the United States, but you will not discuss those same conversations with this committee?
Fifth.
John Eastman refused to answer the committee's questions because he believed his answers could incriminate him in crimes he committed with the President of the United States, the President who refused to give him a pardon for those potential crimes. We don't know every question John Eastman was asked in his deposition with the committee, but if he was asked about his communication with Clarence Thomas's wife, then he probably took the Fifth Amendment for that question too. Yesterday, the Washington Post revealed that Virginia Thomas exchanged emails with John Eastman at a time when Virginia Thomas was urging White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in text messages already made public to break the law and overturn the results of the presidential election. We reported last night that the January 6th committee was considering whether to ask Virginia Thomas to testify. And today, Chairman Benny Thompson said the committee has sent a letter to Virginia Thomas asking for her testimony. Virginia Thomas told the Trump-supporting Daily Caller, quote, "I can't wait to clear up misconceptions. I look forward to talking to them."
It is Friday, the 17th of June of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the Diner of Life. Yeah, put that in your hopper. Okay, yeah. We always do here, at least on Fridays. French 77s are virtually mixed up and poured and ready for your virtual imbibing pleasure. So do imbibe. If you happen to be imbibing in the analog world, I feel compelled to tell you this. The French 77 is the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktailing. It's not an opinion. It's a fact by consensus. I'm just letting you know. But it is also a very potent spirit. So don't get carried away by the spirits. Okay? Sip slowly. And drink some water too. All right? That's a good thing to do because, as we know, one gets dehydrated by those molecules. And one must replenish their hydration. Okay. PSA's out of the way about personal responsibility. Let's talk about the personal responsibility of that great hero, Mike Pence. All right. Yeah, he's a little Weasley guy. You know, Mike Pence is that Colonel or Corporal Ofen in Saving Private Ryan. You know, the one who was a Weasley little guy, and I don't know, he's just Weasley. I'll just put this as an aside. I always hate it when they make the Weasley guy the one who's sort of like educated and learned and, you know, well-read. I hate that. I really do. But anyway, Owen was this little Weasley guy who got some people killed on his side. Okay? And that's what I think of Mike Pence. Now, in the end, Mike Pence did the right thing. But only because his back was up against the wall. There was a gallows already built. And who wants to see their wife and kids hung before you are? And that's exactly what would happen. That mob didn't care about personal responsibility. It was a mob. They were all justified for whatever behavior happened, right down to smearing shit on the walls of the Capitol. Jesus. And they call themselves patriots. 1776 returns my ass. Yeah, they're fighting for the Brits. And we know what happened to them. I don't know. Actually, I really don't want to make peace with them. I don't want to break bread with them. No, they're backstabbers. You can't trust them. All right? There's some people in life you can't trust. And I'm thinking that the Republican Party and anybody after all of this says, oh, yeah, Trump's our guy. Or, oh, yeah, I'm still a Republican. How anybody could still call themselves that after all that's been revealed. I know some people are more interested in, I don't know, the Cobra Kai guy. Or they're more interested in what's happening in one of these new pro wrestling leagues. What's happening with that? How many pro wrestling leagues can you have? I guess as many channels on cable as there are. In a way, it kind of goes back, just as another aside, how pro wrestling used to be. It was very regional. They were limited by how far anybody could drive to the auditorium in which the pro wrestling match was taking place. Or if it was on the radio, radio wasn't, they didn't have a fire hose of a frequency in every little burg. So they were limited by the reach of the radio signal. And later on TV. But anyway, what's up with all these like pro wrestling leagues? I don't know. I'm getting over it. I don't know why I'm doing this. It's Friday, but another thing that came to mind I saw recently too is that there's like leagues for kid cage matches. God, I hate that. What are we doing? Are we going back to the Roman times? I guess we are. Hate that. Teaching little kids to just pound on somebody after they're down. It just bugs me. It's bloodlust. Got to teach our kids it's okay to have bloodlust? No. Talk about grooming. Jeez. You got one side with some guys who want to, dress up in dresses and wear makeup and read children's stories. And on the other side, they want to teach the kids how to, break a trachea and keep pounding on somebody until their brain is mush. I never want to teach a kid that. Let the bearded guy with the makeup and the nun outfit read the children's stories. Cage matches for kids. Anyway, Mike Pence. Little Ofen from Corporal Ofen. Weasley little guy. Well read, but a Weasley little guy. Mike Pence. Don't forget, Mike Pence was a shill for big tobacco. All right? And he knew it was addictive, but he also knew where the money was. Mike Pence is no hero. He has presidential ambitions. We all know that. In fact, some of us were saying Mike Pence might be a greater danger than Trump because Mike Pence knows what to do. What do? Do we take on the eliminationist behavior or attitudes that the other side has? Because we have no credibility. Here in the state of Oregon, we can't even apparently run a Democratic Party member against the Repugs. We have to have an independent, a former Democrat who's now an independent, who can bring the extremists together. Yeah, I love the side that we're on the extreme of, like Eisenhower, Republican policies. That's how extreme we are in this state. And on the other side, you got what? Violent militia type members. They call themselves militias. Nazis, Proud Boys. Geez, they're taking over the school boards at gunpoint. And by intimidation, physical intimidation. Extremists. Yeah. Betsy's going to bring both sides to the table. Yeah, the Democrats are always at the table. It's the Republicans that keep leaving the state so that you can't run a government. Nullify it. That is the Republican strategy. So why do we allow them to take part in our government if they are not going to take part in our government in any fashion except to destroy it? Oh, but they were following protocol in their move to destroy democracy. I mean, they are following the rules. F you. I'm not going to allow someone to follow the rules, apparently, and destroy representative democracy in the process. I don't really think the founders envisioned that. Yeah, we vote to be back with the Royals. No, we don't. Oh, I read an article where about half of young women think feminism is bad, and same with the guys. The guys are worse. More than half. Young men think that feminism is bad, that it doesn't help them. It's just like gets in the way. And I'm like, my mom couldn't have a credit card until I was almost out of high school. What's up with that? And how is it that people don't know about that? Because they're not allowed to be taught it. Do you think this move to ban books and critical race theory taught in the schools just sprung up out of nowhere? You can't teach feminism in grade school. You can't teach civics. You can't teach the history of the labor movement. You might get it in an elective, in an upper division class in high school, maybe. All right. Young kids don't know about labor and feminism because they haven't been taught it. We all say, yeah, they never experienced their moms or themselves never being able to have a credit card. Even. And not because of bad credit, okay? Young kids will say, well, I can't get a credit card either. Yeah, you can. That's why you have bad credit, you idiot. What? Pay it off. Okay. So here we are. An uneducated populace, unaware of the virtues of representative democracy, and willing to just throw it in with the fascists because they have no idea what they're doing. And just like that famous Protestant pastor in Nazi Germany said, and then when they came for me, there was nobody left. And we're trying to warn them. And I hate being the book, like in Soylent Green. Edmund G. Robinson was known as the Book because he had books. That's how devolved society had come. He wasn't a learned man, a professor. No. He was a book because he had books. Well, this book's been trying to warn the young kids that pretty soon, you're going to be the Soylent Green. Because Soylent Green is people, my friend. Jeez. So much more coming across the transom. I suppose if I remember it, I'll bring it up. But we do have a curated show for you as we end the week. What a great. I got to tell you, these hearings are great. Some people were concerned that maybe it was a little bit too boring because Ludwig was so halting. Excuse me, not everybody's made for TV. And that guy was pained because he's been like a Republican with a capital R for a long time. He's like taking over William F. Buckley's position as the intellectual giant of the conservative movement. Talk about vocal inflections. Can you imagine people talking about how Buckley would have been talking today? So nasally. So I wasn't offended by that guy's halting, deliberative cadence. Made me hang on every word. The guy was pained. He believes in the romantic notion of representative democracy, even though he's an arch conservative and by their nature, I think, want to destroy democracy. Well, they believe in representative democracy for a few. Let's be clear. But he saw how that would even be destroyed by the machinations of this great giant of a man, Donald Trump, and his minions. So I thought it was quite revealing. Jenny says she's going to sit down. Is it going to be under oath? Donald Trump wants his equal time. Yeah, he doesn't mean sitting under oath at the committee. He means the major networks just giving him a free forum to spew. No, you don't get equal time, buddy. But you will get a chance to testify under oath. You will. Okay, what is on the curated portion of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Republican voters in Nevada picked a nominee for Attorney General who once called for the lynching of the state's current Attorney General, who just happens to be black. Yeah, she said, I didn't mean it to be racist. Really? A Nebraska man pleaded guilty on charges that he threatened an election official, a first conviction for a Justice Department task force charged with protecting poll workers. Say that real fast. And as severe floods ravage Montana, where in the world is Governor Greg Gianforte? Where? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where defying international condemnation, the Mayanmar junta has vowed to execute pro-democracy activists. And that's coming to, a suburb near us quite soon if we're not careful. And Dutch authorities deported a Russian spy posing as a Brazilian national in an attempt to infiltrate the International Criminal Court. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And I have not reminded folks in some time that Kelly will be at Netroots Nation this year. So I'm reminding you, and stay tuned. Well, of course, Netroots Nation is coming up. So stay tuned for great content once again. And this year in person, even though it seems like at least where I'm at, COVID's not over, and we're actually told to wear masks in my county again. We'll get into that in the weather. But do stay tuned for great content from Netroots Nation once again as Kelly Lincoln in person in Pittsburgh. Yeah. If you would then look across the page of our homepage at netrootsradio.com from that chat room link that I mentioned, you'll notice the link to our Patreon site, and we need money. That's why that's there. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and send us what you might spend, say, on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could buy us one of those once a month and send the money our way, we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare, pay our bills, fly under the radar, and for now continue this resistance, a powerhouse of resistance, I might add, against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States of America, but I'm going to tell you again, against representative democracy itself around the world. And I'm not kidding. That sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. It is a fact. And we're doing our small part. But if you could help us out and buy us a coffee once a month and send the money our way, we'll continue this powerhouse of resistance because we take our civic duty quite seriously. We do. And thank you for your generosity and generosity of those in the future for allowing us to continue fulfilling the civic duty that the founders originally intended so many years ago. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Why? Because I'll tell you why. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I really try to get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. But the show notes and links can be found on Daily Codes. And one way to find that is to go follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And those links will be there. At least you can find the general page for West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and other things too. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Oh, and also, you can find the deep archive library of Netroots Radio for the last 11 years at the Internet Archive at archive.org. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the American Independent by Emily Singer. Republican voters in Nevada picked a nominee for Attorney General who once called for the lynching of the state's current Attorney General, who is black. With 81% of the vote counted yesterday, Wednesday, Attorney Sigal Chattah defeated fellow attorney Tisha Black in the Republican primary by a wide 51% to 39.9% margin, according to the New York Times. Chattah will face current Democratic Attorney General Aaron Ford in the general election in November. According to texts released by Sarah Ashton Carrillo, a former friend, in April of 2021, Chattah had written to her about Ford. This guy should be hanging from a fucking crane. What? She said later that the comment was tongue-in-cheek and had no racial overtones. Chattah, who immigrated to the United States from Israel at the age of 14, told the Las Vegas Review-Journal in February, "When I say to my friends I'm going to hang you from a crane, I don't literally mean I'm going to hang you from a crane. I would never attribute a racial context to hanging from a crane. That is my culture. That is what is done to people in the Middle East, to traders. And that's just part of my vernacular. Oh, you mean people who have voiced concerns about Palestinian independence and you hang them from cranes? And that's not supposed to be, that's just supposed to be funny? Okay. Like I said, they got the eliminationist rhetoric down. What's next? Hanging from a crane. Chadha, who rose to prominence among conservatives in Nevada by suing Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak over his COVID-19 mitigation efforts, including efforts to end mask and vaccination requirements, and she opposes reproductive rights and says she would prosecute women who get abortions. Well, so much for being true to her Jewish faith. I'm just saying. And during the television program Nevada Newsmakers on the 5th of May, whether she would be in favor of changing the state's statutory right to abortion, Chadha responded, as somebody that is pro-life, I would definitely take the position that life begins at the time of fetal heartbeat. There is no such thing. And really, the way I look at it is the same way that we do sentencing enhancements on unborn children, victims of unborn children. I would marry it to that. I have a problem with that inconsistency. With abortion rights hanging in the balance, as the Supreme Court appears poised to overturn the landmark Roe v. Wade decision that affirmed the right to an abortion, a GOP-controlled Nevada legislator could enact laws to make the procedure illegal, and whoever wins the race for Attorney General would be responsible for enforcing those laws. Now, of course, Chadha is not the only extremist Nevada Republicans had nominated on Tuesday, in their primary, of course. GOP voters nominated Jim Marchant, Secretary of State, a position that would place him in charge of running the state's elections. Well, Marchant is a Trump supporter who has pushed voter fraud lies and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. In 2020, Marchant lost a House race and sued to overturn his loss, claiming fraud. His suit was thrown out by a Nevada County Court District Judge. Now, if elected in November, Marchant said he would get rid of voting machines, early voting, and mail-in voting and hire what he called our people as poll workers. Oh, in other words, we're not having elections anymore. Republican voters also picked right-wing extremist Michelle Fiore as their nominee for state treasurer. Now, we all know her for her crazy stuff with the Bundys, and both out there in the scrub brush when old Dad Bundy wouldn't pay his grazing fees to the feds. So they said, hey, you gotta pay us the grazing fees or we're confiscating cattle. And that was the first time that we saw armed white nationalists pointing down from above on overpass on federal officers, and nothing was done about it. Well, she's also pushed bigoted and false conspiracy theories, including that the elementary school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, was the fault of pharmaceutical companies that are giving these individuals pharmaceutical psychotropic drugs. Wow, is she a Scientologist too? Claiming without evidence that the shooter was on a lot of different medications from transgendering, so his mind was quite defective. Fiora is a right-wing militia sympathizer and anti-vaxxer who has falsely said that cancer is a fungus that can be flushed out of the body. Now, we know John Ralston. He's the longtime political reporter from Nevada who is now CEO of the Nevada Independent. He said on June 15th of the Nevada Republicans, not sending their best. David Nakamura of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. I should note before we begin that this is just an example of the wheels of justice seemingly moving slow. For all of those who think they got away with it, we're coming for you. A Nebraska man pleaded guilty yesterday, Thursday, on charges that he threatened an election worker over social media last year, marking the first conviction for a Justice Department task force charged with protecting poll workers. Federal authorities said Travis Ford, age 42, of Lincoln, Nebraska, posted multiple hostile messages on a Instagram page associated with the official who was not named in the Justice Department news release. Do you feel safe? You shouldn't. Do you think Soros will or can protect you? Ford wrote in one August 2021 message, apparently referring to Democratic mega donor George Soros, who has long been the subject of false conspiracies from far-right and anti-Semitic groups. And I should note, I still haven't gotten my Soros money. I wish these far-right and anti-Semitic groups would help out and get me my Soros money. In another posting, Ford wrote, "Your security detail is far too thin and incompetent to protect you. They're a poll worker. They don't have a security detail. What do you think they are? The Supreme Court?" The Justice Department will not tolerate illegal threats of violence against public officials. Are there legal threats of violence? Threats of violence against election officials are dangerous for people's safety and dangerous for our democracy. Well, that's good. That's good that that's noted. In July of 2021, the Justice Department launched a task force led by Deputy Attorney General Lisa O. Monaco aimed at combating threats of violence against election workers, part of a broader effort to ensure the right to vote. In a memo to federal prosecutors, Monaco cited a significant increase in the number of threats against poll workers. And the task force has charged at least 2 other people with crimes, with scores of more to come. Karun Brouillard of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Montana National Guard soldiers are deployed around the Yellowstone region, where they say they have rescued dozens of people from this week's severe floods and ushered travelers along ravaged roads. The FEMA administrator is now in the state surveying the destruction. Montana Red Cross officials are operating evacuation centers across the area. But one key figure is not on the ground at this historic disaster. Montana Governor Greg Gianforte, parenthetical R. That's like repugs. Gianforte's office has said he left for a personal trip outside of the country with his wife before heavy rains deluged southwest Montana, washing away bridges, sweeping buildings into rushing rivers, and closing entrances to Yellowstone National Park, the region's premier tourist attraction, and a pillar of its summertime economy. Gianforte's spokeswoman has declined to disclose his whereabouts or specify when the Republican will return, saying in a statement on Wednesday only that he would be returning early and as quickly as possible. You know, they already paid for the safari, so they can't leave early. They already paid for it. In a statement yesterday, Thursday, Gianforte announced that he had secured a major disaster declaration from President Biden, which the governor said will supply federal aid to further help our communities respond to the severe flooding, recover, and rebuild. The statement made no mention of the governor's location or expected return date. Brooke Stroke, his spokeswoman, did not provide additional details in response to a request for comment, but NBC Montana reported that Gianforte's office said he would return to the state maybe today on Friday. Gianforte's office said he would return, or Gianforte's last public appearance in the state took place last Friday at the groundbreaking of Montana State University's Innovation Campus. His absence has prompted speculation and some grumbling on social media, where some critics have compared him to Ted Cruz, who left the country as the Lone Star State suffered through a massive electricity crisis during 2021. Unlike Cruz, though, Gianforte left before the flooding. Where in the world is Governor Gianforte? The Montana Democratic Party tweeted, "It's about time you came back home." It is. And it's about time that we get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, body horror elevated. Crimes of the Future is a hard movie to classify, which just might be the intention of the film's Canadian writer-director David Cronenberg. Set sometime in the near future, the humans in Crimes of the Future have evolved past their ability to feel pain, which isn't a stretch after enduring the prescription drug ads in an average hour of TV. Along with that, they are developing, as in the case with the protagonist Saul, the ability to grow new organs. Saul, in fact, has turned this into performance art. Along with his creative and life partner Caprice, he now entertains paying audiences with live surgeries depicted with disturbing precision. Saul, played by a wonderfully understated Viggo Mortensen, is an artist who literally exposes and places himself in vulnerable situations. His insides being revealed is symbolically analogous to Cronenberg's own life. It can be interpreted almost as a roundabout autobiography. Written over 20 years ago, this is Cronenberg at the peak of his weirdness. This film isn't for everyone, nor is it easy to understand, but nonetheless it is one of the most original and starkly beautiful films to have come out in some time. Everything from the cast, fronted by the aforementioned Mortensen, with performances from Léa Seydoux and Kristen Stewart, to the retro sets, with some of the strangest furniture you'll ever see, work to great effect. This one achieves notoriety for working in a genre that often goes horribly wrong and creating a thoughtful and profound mystery, drama, and meditation on what it means to be human, even as humans constantly grow and change. An art house feature that cares little for a satisfying conclusion, Crimes of the Future is an intellectual exercise that makes for an unforgettable movie experience. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figuerella, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Warning, this Civil Liberties Minute uses a racial epithet. I'm Bill Newman. There are hundreds upon hundreds of them, mountains, valleys, creeks, lakes, and other physical landmarks that have one thing in common. The word, here comes the racial epithet, squaw in their name. Squaw Valley, for example. The ubiquity of that racial epithet and its offensiveness is the subject of a featured article in a recent edition of the Sierra Club magazine titled, What's in a Name? By Dina Julio Whitaker. The article, after noting the unclear etymology of the word, goes on to say, quote, it's inarguable that over the centuries the word has become a misogynist and racist slur directed at indigenous women. After that, the article spells the offensive word SQ*****. Last November, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland created a process to review and replace names of places on federal lands that are derogatory. In explaining her classification of this word as derogatory and offensive, Secretary Haaland said, our nation's lands and waters should be places to celebrate the outdoors and our shared cultural heritage, not to perpetuate the legacies of oppression. A history of racism and attempted genocide must not be ignored, it must be recognized. But certainly that history need not be honored or celebrated. The effort to replace the names of places that denigrate Native women, that effort is welcome and long overdue. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. Mary Harris, better known as Mother Jones, held a rally in Philadelphia. The famous Irish-American labor leader had come to Pennsylvania to support a strike of textile workers. As many as 100,000 workers were out on strike. 16,000 of them were children. In her autobiography, Mother Jones recalled how the children came to the Union headquarters. Many of them had suffered some sort of injury in the mills. She called the rally to bring public attention to the conditions of child labor. She had tried to get the local newspapers to report on the injuries, but the newspapers balked because the mill owners held stock in the papers. In her autobiography, Mother Jones described the rally, writing, "A great crowd gathered in the public square in front of City Hall. I put the little boys with their fingers off and hands crushed and maimed on a platform. I held up their mutilated hands and showed them to the crowd and made the statement that Philadelphia's mansions were built on the broken bones, the quivering hearts, and the drooping heads of these children, that their little lives went out to make the wealth for others." The newspapers picked up the quote about the mansions and reported it in their papers. Mother Jones was pleased that she had helped to get the conversation about child labor started. But she knew it would quickly fade away if she did not keep public attention on the brutal conditions children faced every day. So she planned what has become known as the March of the Mill Children, from Philadelphia to President Theodore Roosevelt's home in Oyster Bay, New York. Through her efforts, Mother Jones helped to bring national attention to the plight of child labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting temperatures much cooler than even yesterday, where we were barely at 70 degrees. Looks like we might be around 60 today. Foggy conditions currently, with rain showers occurring right now as we speak and thunderstorms developing for the afternoon. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it about a quarter inch of rain, with even more rain showers this evening, with mostly cloudy conditions overnight. Lows in the upper 40s to low 50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and should drop almost a quarter inch also tonight. Partly cloudy tomorrow on Saturday, with highs bumping 70 degrees Fahrenheit, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and even warmer temperatures coming on Sunday. Confirmed cases of coronavirus have not been updated since we spoke about it yesterday, but I will give you a reminder. We have confirmed cases here in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon, standing at 456,014 infections, with deceased confirmed at 548. Grass pollen is rated very high right outside the window here in Rogue River. The air quality index is good, though it has notched up a few digits and now stands at 33 parts per million. And that daytime UV index remains very high at level 9, so do take care. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.84 inches. Visibility is down to a half mile, indicative of the foggy conditions I mentioned about earlier. And the relative humidity is at 92%, almost tropical. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 88 degrees and sunny. Paris is 94 and sunny with a heat advisory, and it's getting hot there a little early. Rome is 82 and fair with their own heat advisory that may impact critical electrical infrastructure. Kyiv is 71 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 70 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 84 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 72 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 and partly cloudy with a fog advisory onshore and offshore for small craft. And New York, New York is 82 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Rebecca Tan of the Washington Post brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Myanmar's military junta has doubled down on threats to carry out its first execution since seizing power, defying repeated appeals from the international community and outraging pro-democracy activists who have spent more than a year under siege. Myanmar's military has not used the death penalty for more than 30 years, but amid a violent and so far unsuccessful campaign to stamp out resistance, officials are turning to new forms of intimidation. At least 14,000 people have been arrested, and at least 114 of them sentenced to death in the past year. In early June, military officials vowed to follow through on the executions of 4 individuals on death row, including 2 high-profile activists. Kia Min-yu, also known as Ko Jimmy, who rose to prominence in a series of student uprisings in 1988, and Vyo Zia-ta, a hip-hop artist turned member of parliament, widely admired among Myanmar's youth. Zachary Abuza, a professor at the National War College in Washington who studies Southeast Asian security issues, said the threat to execute renowned activists is part of a wider strategy the junta hopes will terrorize people into submission. Its tactics have been honed over years, spent crushing ethnic insurgencies, and including the razing of villages and the targeting of civilians.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Annabelle Timsit and Adam Taylor of the Washington Post bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Dutch authorities made a surprise announcement late yesterday, Thursday, that they had refused entry to a Russian spy posing as a Brazilian national to infiltrate the International Criminal Court. Authorities speculated that the man was seeking to gain access to information relating to the ICC investigations of Russian war crimes. He was sent back to Brazil on the first flight out, the counter-espionage agency of the Netherlands said of the events, which took place in April. But social media accounts tied to the Russian intelligence officer also showed that he studied at top academic institutions in Europe and the United States, including the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, a key place of study for future foreign policy elites. The Dutch agency released a statement laying out the extraordinary details of the case. It said a 33-year-old man purporting to be a Brazilian national flew to the Netherlands from Brazil to start an internship at the ICC at The Hague, but he was really a 36-year-old Russian intelligence officer named Cherkasov, posing as Mueller Fiera. The agency released copies of a document detailing his elaborate cover identity. Jill Rosen, director of media relations at Johns Hopkins, said records showed that a man with a slightly different first name, Victor Mueller Fiera, had enrolled at the School of Advanced International Studies in 2018 to pursue a master's degree. And Eugene Finkel, an associate professor of international affairs at Johns Hopkins and an expert on genocide, wrote on Twitter that he had taught the man he believed to be Mueller Fiera and wrote him a letter of recommendation for the ICC internship. Giving my research focus, it made sense. I wrote him a letter. A strong one, in fact. Yes, me. I wrote a reference letter for a GRU officer. I will never get over this fact, Finkel wrote. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know that we will be meeting up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.